For over half a century, humans have endeavored to make business a force for good. But is the movement working? Or is it time to explore a new path forward? Welcome to Less Talk, More Action. We are your hosts, Joel Caesar and Owen Barrett, experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. In each episode, we ask provocative questions and share stories from the front lines of sustainability with leaders in science, tech, and business taking real action to design a cleaner, better future. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to the Let's Talk More Action podcast. My name is Joel Caesar, the world's undisputed voice of building decarbonization. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett, the self-proclaimed Adam Newman of Green Building. Today's guest is Akhila Kosaraju, co-founder and lead strategist of What If Design, a design studio on a mission to elevate the climate movement by designing socially and environmentally responsible brands, products, and services. She was a fantastic guest. I love when we can bring on these diverse perspectives that aren't just trying to pitch us climate solutions or pitch their own climate solutions. Like, she's operating in this nexus of startups, government, go-to-market strategy, communications, but really bringing a fresh, cool lens. And I know you have a relationship with her professionally, so I enjoyed it. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think she has such an important message, which is just you can't forget that decision-making at a company level is multidisciplinary. So if all you're doing is pitching the environmental impact or the environmental value, it's just not really going to take. And you have to always keep that kind of holistic perspective and be able to really pitch the value prop across like all the different disciplines that you're hitting. And I think she does a really good job at kind of expressing the importance of it. And she has a whole company that focuses on helping climate tech companies do it.
And bringing such value. I mean, this isn't breaking news here, but so many great ideas, great technologies, smart people, competent teams die because they get some funding to get off the ground, but they never figure out how to go to market or how to simplify their message or how to focus on the right end user and customer as she's trying to help. So hopefully there'll be some people in our audience that learn of her value and her company and apply it, because I think, as we talked about in the show, we don't have time, and we're missing too many opportunities to deploy some of these solutions. So if someone like Akhila can help them get off the ground faster and get to the next stage of their company, then that's what we need.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
All right, but before we get into all that, let's dive into a segment, a bit we're calling Provocative Tweets. Okay? So you and I are both big fans of the All In podcast, right?
Yep.
And I think one of your favorite guys, probably your favorite guy on there, is Chamath Palihapitiya.
Favorite for now.
And he had a tweet, or I think it's his pinned tweet in the moment, where it's long, and he talks a lot about how he does a lot of research and synthesizes a lot of information, and it not only helps him personally, but it helps him in his business and what to focus on with his investments. But I was intrigued by one particular paragraph here where he says, "The world is complex and moves at a rapid pace. One day, climate change is all the news. The next day, it's how AI is on the verge of upending everything we know about everything. Then we need to become experts in superconductors because some meaningful breakthrough may be at hand. Meanwhile, geopolitical chaos in Europe, Middle East, Asia seems to be omnipresent and is constantly challenging the existing world order." So without reading the whole tweet, what caught my attention there was just like, he basically says, we're done with climate change. Oh, it was in the news, and now we're moving on. And it's something I've definitely been feeling, I guess, in the course of working in this industry and making my life's work about climate and sustainability. And you see the rise of AI, and of course some of the big companies that used to be the biggest advocates for climate action just kind of now putting it on the sidelines because they got to build huge data centers to serve the AI market. And if their emissions go up, so be it, because this is the frontier of the world of business. And for the rest of us, it's like, wait, well, so should we just give up? Like, what's the point? And, I give a lot of credit. I'm a fan of the show, The All In. I think they really illuminate the stories of the times and have a really broad global perspective. So when someone like Chamath says this, and maybe he wasn't dismissing it, just kind of saying that's not the priority anymore, but wanted to get your take. Like, if he says something like this, does this mean our work is not important?
Yeah, let's find new jobs, find a new career. No, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
right.
he's wrong, right? And I don't think it needs to be mutually exclusive. I think part of the problem with our country, our generation, is that it is so headline to headline. Like people, it could be anything. It could be AI, it could be climate change, it could be mass shootings. I mean, you name it. Like something will be in the news for a week and then it's gone because everybody loses interest and it's on to the next story. I think what's interesting is climate change is like very closely correlated, or clean technology is closely correlated to AI and geopolitical tensions. Like if you have energy independence, I would advocate that you're probably more insulated from geopolitical incidents. If you have more renewable energy, you're probably in a better position to win the AI race because it's such a huge part of every, new electron brought in online. So I don't know. I think sometimes these people just say things that they're trying to get reactions from. But I mean, I would push back. I do think companies are sort of stripping their ESG goals because they don't want to get targeted by the new administration. But I don't necessarily think that means that they're getting rid of their goals. I just think they're maybe making them most public facing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I do think though we need to be careful. There was and continues to be loud voices would say things like, once we hit 1.5 degrees
Yeah.
warming, then the world is effed and it's
Yeah.
over. And
Yeah.
that's happened. And okay,
Yeah.
I think
I know what's
the,
next.
the planet's still okay right now. And then, all right, well, if we let it get to 2 degrees, or if emissions get to here, XYZ, then it's over. So if you keep setting these damning milestones as a warning to try to create action across the broad spectrum of humanity, and then those thresholds get surpassed and people don't witness Armageddon, then it just
Lose
really,
credibility.
yeah, diminishes everyone's credibility. So I think in the world of climate, we have to, I think, probably recognize here that some of these proclamations that have happened over the last 5 years of 1.5 or 2030, or if we don't do this by 2040, I mean, these deadlines are coming now. And although there's a lot of opportunity to reduce the energy and climate impact of AI, I think we can all acknowledge in the short term, emissions are going to go up.
Yeah, I mean, and we're at a point where climate tech just makes sense. Like it makes sense in so many instances. Can we just stop talking about climate change so much and just talk about this is a better business practice? Or if we need new electrons online, it's faster to go with solar and wind than it is with some sort of fossil fuel. Like I think we all as an industry just need to take a step back and stop kind of like beating our chests and talking everything about climate change and just go back to like different fundamentals or first principles of what actually works or what makes the most sense.
It's so true. I had a post recently about being inspired. It was an Earth Day post, and I was just trying to think, remembering why I got into this industry, or why I decided when I was in college I wanted to do something with my life for the environment. And it was climate change was a thing, a topic then. That's why I learned about it in undergrad, but it wasn't the reason I decided to try to create a career around protecting the environment. It was because I loved nature and I loved getting outside and I wanted to protect animals in the ocean. And yeah, I think we might be losing a lot of coalition by focusing so much on counting an invisible gas in the atmosphere.
Yeah, counting in reports. They're doing more harm than good.
Well, that was fun. You'll have more provocative tweets from the Less Talk, More Action crew. Until next time, enjoy the show. Today's guest is Akhila Kosaraju, co-founder and lead strategist of What If Design, a design studio on a mission to elevate the climate movement by designing socially and environmentally responsible brands, products, and services. With a background spanning architecture, systems thinking, and service design, Akhila helps organizations uncover bold solutions to complex challenges. She has worked with companies backed by the Department of Energy, ARPA-E, and Excel VC to support them in streamlining their communications, creating a strong brand, and simplifying complex technical information in carbon capture, climate venture building, GHG sensors, large-scale solar, etc. She and her team have designed the user experience of software climate solutions like EV battery management systems, fleet management, ESG vendor sourcing platforms, etc. She is passionate about co-creation, designing for equity, and making the what if a reality. Get ready for a conversation full of creativity, strategy, and purpose. So, Akhila, welcome to the Less Talk, More Action podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So we get right to business here on the show. We always ask our guests the same question to kick us off.
Yeah.
How are you taking action to make the world a better place?
I think this question would have had like very different answers in the last couple of years, like professionally and personally. But I'll start with the professional. Me and my team are basically helping a lot of climate companies increase their adoption in the market with the power of design. Now, what that looks like is primarily in like two ways. One is like communications, and the other one is through creating seamless user experiences for sustainable products and services. When we went into climate, it was pretty clear that on the hard tech, deep tech side of things, especially the technologies that are on the pathway to commercialization, they don't speak to the customer and business value as much, and focus a lot more on the technical superiority of things. So we try and create like brands, websites, and collateral that facilitate the increase in like sales, partnerships, whatever basically gets them to market at a larger scale. And then on the products UX side of things, you guys have looked at like building management software. Like, it's so unsexy, right? So stuff like that, even just like the home electrification process, or just everything in order for someone to, adopt these technologies at scale has so much friction to it. And obviously there's a lot of like technical friction, like financial, lot of it. But we are trying to focus on the experience of it because we're the experts in that. Personally, I think, I'm vegetarian. I've turned vegetarian for the past 6-ish years now. Definitely have been in like and it has been a strong shift from like an I need meat in every meal sort of a person to do that. Just have lived minimally for like quite a while, and all of the general individual action stuff. But I'll just pause there.
Akhila, so the audience may not know this, but you helped turn the Shine website into a masterpiece. You took it from something that was probably hard to understand to something that's much easier. So we fall into the category of having a value prop that's kind of hard to understand, or we're so in the weeds that we have a hard time getting it out to the masses.
Yep.
But what made you focus on climate? Is it because you were passionate about the space and you're like, these companies don't know how to communicate with the end user in a way that they get?
So I started out as an architect. So I was working on like lead building, sustainable architecture and urban design as well. But like when I got into it, it was a lot of like box checking and not as creative as I thought it would be. So I kind of like moved away from that, and had always been like working with like a lot of like startup founders, doing a lot of their like digital design work. So in 2020, we ended up getting like some big projects in like the healthcare space. So we weren't always in climate, but so we worked with like the Ministry of Health of Saudi Arabia for like their big UX revamp of one of their big enterprise product. We worked with like a few health tech unicorns for like a lot of like COVID vaccination awareness campaigns, right? And all of that felt really meaningful. But like once that phase ended, there were like these, crypto projects and like finance projects, which it was fine. It's bringing in the money, but it wasn't really like meaningful to us. And I was definitely missing like the larger mission / like, why are we doing this? Sort of a question. So I was definitely missing like the environmental impact piece of things. So me and my co-founder, we were really trying to understand like, where do we fall into this place, right? Like what kind of companies need our help? Where do we fit in this entire area of solutions? and spoke to a ton of people, just educated ourselves in like understanding a little bit of the science, and realized that like there's one category of personas where there are like PhD scientists, folks who are super technical, very much in the weeds of the R&D or like bringing a tech to commercial, like from the lab to commercialization, and they speak to other scientists and they speak to other technical folks. They don't speak the business language. So that was like super evident and clear to us. On the software side of things as well, it felt like it was, for some reason, the design has not been prioritized in across climate tech. I feel like maybe because like a lot of, I'm not sure why that has happened, but it was pretty clear that there was a value prop for design to be a facilitator for adoption. So I think those pieces kind of just fit in. Yeah.
You know, the transition from architecture to what you're doing now, not to bore you with my story here, but it's interesting how you spot an inefficiency in a market that needs help and that could do better for the world, and then you try to fill it. Seems like what you're doing. I would say in the moment, you know, my current role, I'm in a go-to-market growth role, and it's sort of new in my career arc. But I would say I spent time at the city of Santa Monica running sustainability, and I was on the design and construction team, and got sold to a lot, climate tech products, climate tech solutions. Then I went to Google, similarly, got sold to a lot. I was the owner, and you see good pitches, you see poor pitches, and then you try to be open-minded and look past sometimes maybe a bad presentation and say, well, okay, can the product help me? And Owen and I, one of the themes of this show, the brand Less Talk, More Action, we're trying to bring to light is this idea that climate sustainability, we have the tools we need on the shelf. We need to be better at deploying them efficiently. We need to, you use the word friction, I think is a word I use a lot too. It's like, how do we alleviate some friction? And going back to my story about growth and go-to-market and sales and, the role I'm in now, I thought I never really expected to, when I got into climate and sustainability and wanted to do something with my career that I thought was for a bigger purpose, I never, at least back when I made that choice decades ago, didn't think sales is the place, but after witnessing there's sometimes good products, good solutions don't happen because the sales pitch is off, the communication is wrong, the value proposition is not presented properly, we're missing a lot of opportunity. And so, coming back to what you're describing, I'm sure you're recognizing the value you're bringing. If you can take scientific ideas and these brilliant people who are trying to solve the world's problems and help translate them, then that's how we get to action, right?
Yep. I feel like the whole premise of us focusing on climate has also been that, yes, there are some technical problems, some financial problems, but like it's majorly an adoption problem. Like, how do you deploy? How do you get to like mass scale adoption is basically the problem that we're trying to help solve.
We talk about that all the time. I would actually say that the new technology is more distracting than it is helpful. Like we have so many technologies that just need to be deployed at scale, and it's all these new, shiny objects that people get sort of distracted by instead of just deploying the boring tech that's been around for 50 years that works.
Yep.
So Akhila, I discovered you on LinkedIn with a post of yours that went kind of viral, I would say, where you were describing, a lot of conferences, I think, right? You sort of just cataloged for the community.
Yeah.
I'll just read it. Is it just me, or are there too many climate events to keep up with? And then you added a lot of value here. So I would love for you to illuminate, maybe this can help educate the market and hopefully our audience around the idea of sharing your knowledge and to be more open on social media and like what this has done for your brand. Not saying coming on the Let's Talk More Action podcast is going to change the trajectory of your company, but it brought you to my attention, and I hadn't heard of you before, even though you were working with my former business partner here.
Yeah.
But I think it's, something that I've tried to lean into as well is LinkedIn or any social media. It rewards bringing value to people. And I think more of us should try to operate that way. Again, as a community, if you call us sustainability, climate, Owen often likes to critique this world as being a little timid. And I think we should be probably sharing more. So I guess maybe illuminate your strategy on social media and maybe even, the reaction to the post that I'm describing.
Also go into the origin of the post. I'm curious because I share your perspective, I think.
I feel like that post is like the summary of this podcast, right? Like, so I moved to SF probably like about 2 years ago. Was like, oh, I want to go all in on this. I want to be like full in the hub of sustainability and like all this climate tech action. And I've been to a ton of events. I've gone to so many conferences. And I think the mistake there, obviously you learn as you go, but like the first year was probably more generalist conferences than specific industry ones, which means like SF Climate Week, New York Climate Week, Verge, all of these that talk about climate.
A lot of talk, not a
talk.
lot of action, right?
A lot of talk. I think, and then earlier this year, I started going to more specific ones. Like one of our clients got us in, and I ended up attending the ARPA-E Summit, which is very much focused on like energy breakthrough technologies. And then I realized that like the kind of people there they're not generalists. They're like very specific into the vertical that they're trying to solve for, right? And the kind of persona that I was talking about, people who are bringing technologies, who are not working in the lab, who are bringing the technology to market, who are focused on commercialization, those kind of people, who would they want in order to push their technology forward? Like they want to meet with, like if you're working on a building management software, you want to work with property owners, you want to work with real estate firms, right? So I feel like earlier on in my journey, I was like, oh, this is so easy to meet people because there's just so many climate events and conferences out there. But then when you realize you're further along in your journey and you wanna like push your partnership sales, whatever, you need your specific persona, right? And I think the origin of that was just me thinking through in understanding that, hey, like if you want, like, climate is, at the end of the day, it's not an industry or a vertical, right? It's like a theme, and it's a byproduct of our action. Like nobody, I feel like, I don't know if this is a hot take, but like I don't feel like people like go into business, like, yes, people want to change the world. They're on this bigger mission, but they're not building a business in order to get to that mission. They're building a business to make money, to bring value to people and change things for a specific industry, right? And in order to do that, you want to meet people that are relevant to you. And I think the origin for that came from the place where I was thinking that, hey, like we need people to be aware of the conferences that are relevant to them, not these broad generic ones that are, and like, I mean, they also do a great job in bringing people together. But again, like you said, it's a lot of talk and not a lot of action in those spaces. Like the whole point of these conferences and events is supposed to bring different kinds of stakeholders together, right? And potentially, like, if they can collaborate and scale their businesses, that's the whole point. So I think that was like the origin of like why I put together that list. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I agree with you that like, I think too often within the climate theme, we're too idealistic. Like it's got to be perfect or don't do it. And if it's going to have a little bit of harm, but a lot of positive impact, don't do it. And I feel like Joel and I met each other in grad school where, you know, the two of us had some professional experience prior to going to grad school. I almost feel like that needs to be required. Like if you go straight from college right to grad school, you've never tasted the real world. You don't actually know what it takes to get anything done. And so you go into grad school with this crazy expectation of, I'm going to change the world because it's the right thing to do and nobody's going to care if it doesn't make financial sense. It's just going to happen. I kind of feel like we should be pushing grad schools to require some time in the real world, because it would help solve this this persistent problem of being too idealistic within the climate space. Like, we have to do incremental steps forward. We can't expect just like massive leaps of perfection. We're never going to get anything done.
Yeah.
Well, one, Akhila, I'll just add, you started your last answer with, this might be a hot take. So we love that. Bring the hot takes. That's what we live for here. And, this idea that it's not an industry, it shouldn't be a hot take, but it kind of is. I often almost recoil these days when it's like, when I meet people and like, I want to get into climate. And I think we're all agreeing with the same perspective here, which is, that's not a thing. You don't get into climate. There's many different, you said it right, Akhila. It's a theme. It's not an industry. It's not a vertical. There's another a post I was commenting on the other day where someone was describing how they got a question about, hey, I want to get into climate, from some soon-to-be graduate from college, and their answer was, you should get into construction, you should get into plumbing, you should get into HVAC. Like, I'm sure there's a million things we could say. Architecture, of course, would be another one. Like, how do we push the next generation into being more into the verticals that are impacting the climate, so that we steer the people who have a mission to go into those fields and kind of disrupt it from within? And I think that's where we'll get to a better place, as opposed to, I think, young people who maybe don't know what they want to do, and then they go to grad school, like Owen said, and they study climate, and they're not sure about actually how to apply it.
And then they can't get into the field because they don't have any real world skills. It's like, I want to be an energy manager, but I've never actually done anything. Or I want to be a construction manager, but I don't know the first thing about construction. I feel that's a really interesting perspective, Joel, is trying to push kids into the trades that want to get into climate, because the trades have a huge labor shortage, and it does drive, the implementation of most of the technologies that we're talking about. That's interesting. I don't think the unions are doing that. You should reach out.
Well, I just went to the trades there. There's a million things you could say. Just like, don't go into climate. Go into something else, and then try to tackle it from within.
Be more focused. Yeah.
So, Akhila, let's transition more to your company here and what you're trying to accomplish. I know Owen here well, and his website is pretty beautiful. So I knew there was some brilliance behind it that wasn't him. Maybe you can highlight. It seems like the company's off to a great start here in the climate space that you've entered. You said you moved to San Francisco. You wanted to be in the center of it. What's like an ideal kind of project? What are you trying to tackle next? What's your ideal client, problem, challenge? What's the big picture here you're trying to do?
That's a great question. I feel like I ask myself a lot. So right now I was able to very specifically tell you, hey, we're solving communications, we're solving UX, right? And a lot of that is like implementing, by the time we come in, there's like some sort of like understanding of like what the problem is. Like, it's not as messy as you would think it would be, in the sense that I would love for us to like move a little further along, like further behind in the journey of like this driving adoption process, where we are able to map out every stakeholder, understand a lot more about what their motivations, needs, all of that looks like. For example, let's say like we're working with like a fleet management company, and right now we are working on their software that helps fleet managers, manage the drivers and all of that stuff. But we are also hoping that the scope is expanding, but essentially we want to move to a level where we are able to map out every stakeholder apart from like fleet managers, like the delivery partners, the drivers themselves as well, like what's going to drive their adoption of maintaining, fuel efficiency, or like basically how do you map out every user / stakeholder's journey in adopting these kinds of technologies is where we want to move. And I think that's a little bit more messy because it's not very scoped out very clearly up front. It's not like there's a lot that can come out of it, but I feel like more of the strategy piece is where we want to move. Another example for that is that we've been talking to like a government agency in India who's been trying to help small business owners adopt ESG practices, because now that like scope 3 has been a more important piece to the corporates in Europe, they're they're going to be impacted if they're not adopting to those standards. So in order to like figure out, but like to do that in a country like India where there's a lot of like hand to mouth situations for small business owners, it's not it like you can't paint a bigger, oh, you're on this bigger mission sort of picture and assume that they're going to like cut their margins for something like being ESG compliant. So like how do you motivate them? What sort of support do you give them in terms of financing, in terms of expertise, in terms of resources? All of that, like doing that process and creating a program that would help them through this entire journey is obviously like a much messier problem to solve than like create a website or a piece of software product, right? So we definitely want to tackle more of those like innovation oriented projects. And then if you go beyond that, I feel like we also want to work with more companies that are earlier stage, in the sense that, and this is obviously like super messy in my head, and we want to be able to I don't know what that looks like, but more of like a venture studio model of sorts, where we are not just doing like a service for cash sort of model, but like there's equity involved, there's more like it's not just like design, you need it with maybe a fractional CFO, you need it with the fractional GTM person. Like what kind of support do you give earlier stage companies in order for them to move towards commercialization is something that I'm thinking about. But obviously I have no idea what that looks like today.
Is there a lot of overlap, do you think, with customers of your clients? Like within the go-to-market strategy of different clients that you have, do you think you could sort of facilitate matchmaking almost to a certain degree?
Yes, I think so. I think there's a lot of like, especially so last week was FF Climate Week, and I feel like last year the theme was AI and climate was everywhere, and this year it was all commercialization. How do you focus on like commercial milestones over technical ones? Because now the VCs are more focused on how do you move towards profitability because of the environment that we're in, right? So I think there's a lot more focus on like the customer and how do you speak to them and how do you drive that. And obviously design is not the only piece that comes into that play. Like sure, there's a foundation to like making sure you're saying the right, like you're using the right language and like you're sharing the right things, but also your GTM team should know whom they're prospecting is like the right persona, and like there's a lot of like pieces to it, so there is definitely a lot of overlap.
Now you're working. You just expressed desire to work with early stage companies. You're in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. The heart of the startup world. But you're working with the government of India, the federal government, sounds like, and you've worked with the Department of Energy. So, how does the juxtaposition between big government and early stage startup, is that on purpose, or are you just kind of navigating your own world and finding opportunities where you can?
We've worked with we've worked with companies that have been backed by the DOE, which means that they've been very, commercialization, like lab to commercialization sort of oriented companies. The Indian one, we're still like in conversations. But I think again, like persona wise, I feel like we definitely fit into that like lab to commercialization sort of companies is like a great persona fit. But I think we're still like figuring out whom do we serve, and like especially for these large scale innovation kinds of projects that I talked about that are often like really messy, you need much larger stakeholders to help facilitate that, right? So I think we're still figuring out our way, honestly. But yeah, I think the end goal is the same for everyone.
Well, Owen knows this well. I've learned this from working with Owen as an entrepreneur that he's been and has had some successful startups and some failures. We love, in our previous show that we had called Climate Rebels, we tried to do this, and we're going to do this here on this show. Celebrating the people like you that are at the stage that you're at, where you're describing, look, we're figuring things out, and we know we have value, we know we have a story to tell, but it's part of the journey. I think also that it's good for everyone to realize that wants to start their own company, and I'm sure this is something you do even with your advisory work, is like embrace the messiness, embrace the uncertainty. It will live there, but the great startups, the great entrepreneurs kind of learn to live in it and prosper anyway.
I feel like there's such an opportunity too. I mean, like Joel said, I've started a few companies, and every time at the very beginning, there's such a need for, either like a basic website or taking sort of the internal messaging that's way too focused and making it more broad so that everybody can understand it. Like, that's not a unique problem. Every startup has that to a certain degree, I would think. And it's probably even worse in the climate space, because so often we want to like stay within the climate echo chamber and talk about all the great environmental benefits and blah, 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 that no one really cares about in the real world. Yep. So it's like, all right, you can focus on that if you want, but you should also talk about like these other impacts that are probably more tangible for the larger audience.
Yep.
Owen, how did you find Akhila, by the way?
I have no idea. I think my partner Grant, right? I honestly have no idea. I thought it was such a small world.
Yeah, it was you. I reached out to you, but then, so I think you posted on Work on Climate, if I'm not wrong.
Oh yeah. It was like a Slack channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but then like most of my conversations with like Grant in the beginning. Yeah.
So Akhila, what's your general go-to-market strategy for yourself to find customers like Owen? What's the tips, the trade here?
Just creeping on Slack channels?
Yeah, Slack channels. Again, figuring that out. I feel like a lot of it has been very much like word of mouth, network, Slack channels, events, organic content, people reaching out, a lot of inbound. But
has that LinkedIn post led to business?
Few conversations. Yeah, ongoing. Yeah.
I'm sure.
But yeah, a lot of like content, organic, inbound is what has happened so far. But I think we're like starting to think about like outbound and like how do we reach out to relevant people and things like that as well.
How do you guys, so you're working with all kinds of different technologies within the climate tech space, or even go broader than that, different companies within this climate theme that we're talking about. What is the skill set of you and your team that you're able to like distill the messaging of all these different technologies and try and make it approachable for the average person?
I think the willingness to just like understand a little bit of like the technical pieces of it as well, and like link every like if there's like a deck or like any sort of paper that like a company is publishing or anything, I think the immediate question that we try to ask is like, which industry, which customer, why will they go out of their way to, engage with you, sort of thing. So I think just asking those questions has been very useful. I am very much on the like, we need to speak to the customer sort of piece. My team is mostly like they're really great at like the visual design stuff and like the motion graphics and the website development and like all the implementation side of things. But I'm definitely like the one who's like thinking a lot more about the communications aspect of things. My co-founder is more on the UX side of things, so he's definitely more on the product experience, strategy, user research, that side of things. Yeah.
Joel and I like to talk about sometimes all the grifting that goes on within the climate tech space and sort of these made up technologies and things that people raise a lot of money for, but they don't really have any impact. Do you guys maintain a moral compass? Like, will you work for anybody, or if you come across a company where you're like, this just feels a little bit slimy, like, will you reject them?
Yeah, I feel like some of the red flags like show up pretty early on. If they're like, um,
I'm surprised Owen got past you.
It's all Grant. Grant's very authentic.
yeah, Grant. I feel like Grant and I like really vibed on like having like a bigger mission and like all of that stuff quite a bit. Um, and yeah, like for example, like I think even when I spoke to Grant, like our conversation was very much around like doing this in all 50 states, and like you were certified I think in all 50 states. I'm not sure about that, but like uh the like I think there's a very clear way where you can link credibility to what you're doing. For example, like your team at Shine, like it was very clear you guys were already in like real estate asset management, like you've been and seen breathed the solar space. But there are a lot of companies that are just like they're still like idea punching, or like they're still like I think there was one of your competitors, I'm not taking any names, but they were doing the same thing as you, but they didn't really have anything to back that up in terms of like, sure, this is a good idea, but why are you going to succeed, right? And I think the pattern we've noticed very quickly in that as well is that like there's not like, maybe it's because they've not been like repeat entrepreneurs, or it shows up that they have not, that they're not focused on like customer, they're focused on flashier things than the end value of it.
Yeah.
I think to answer your question though, I feel like we do need to do a better job in like, I don't know, quantifying what I just said, which we don't yet. But would love to do that. But yes, I feel like it's easy to get an subjective like understanding of like, are what you're doing really, is it really going to lead to large scale impact? Like for example, like even like individual action apps, right? Like I I mean, I feel like I don't think I can provide a lot of value in that. Um, l- but yeah, it's subjective as of now.
Yeah. 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 Totally get it.
Yeah.
Well, Akhila, this has been fascinating. We're going to have to slowly wrap up here. We have a question we ask at the beginning, and we always try to end with another question. Here, we're trying to focus on optimism, solutions in a sustainability climate movement that can often kind of drown in their sorrows and get focused on the negative. We want to end on a positive note. So what gives you hope for the future?
The people. I think as much as I said that, people don't like build businesses for the larger thing, I feel like yes, people want to like move up their career. Yes, people want to build, like create like meaningful business value and impact, and want to build big businesses. I think there's a there's an often like, I don't know, like a soldier vibe approach, or like a mission orientedness to everyone, that they're just like willing to help. I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with folks which I don't think would have been possible if they were not in climate. Like people are very willing to like chat. People are like, even the posts that went viral, like there were a couple of people who like reached out to me and were like, oh, like I can help build like a bigger product out of this to make it more intuitive, like, and like all just out of like, okay, we just want to like add value to this and not like turn it into something bigger. Or not that there's anything wrong with that, but I feel like there's we're not quitters, we're rebels, we're soldiers sort of attitude, which I feel like is important in this time, but also it inspires you when you're all in the down lows of daily life, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well
it's
said.
I
well
wouldn't
said.
know from
Yeah.
you guys too.
Well, we really appreciate having you, Akhila. You'll have to come back again and keep us updated on your progress. Um, if you can, tell the audience, how do we find you? Plug your website, plug your handles. What's the best way to follow Akhila's journey?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. I don't know. Do I put it in the chat?
Well, we'll post it in the show notes. You can talk. We'll follow up later with the actual links.
My LinkedIn is probably the best way. And then my website is also there.
And what's the website?
It's called What If Design.
Well, really great. I think we'll wrap up on that. It's been, again, a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, everyone, audience, for joining. You can find Owen and I on LinkedIn, usually actively antagonizing the more talk, more wine sustainability crowd. You can find this podcast and more great content at lesstalkmoreaction.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to take action and make the world a better place?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.